We will now invite the 18th District Congressional candidates, Representatives Lofgren and Peter Hernandez, to the stage. So our process is to give each of you 30 seconds for an introduction, and then after that, a minute and a half for answers to our questions. For the introductory portion, we'll start with Peter Hernandez.
Thank you. My name is Peter Hernandez, candidate for Congress in California's 18th District. I've already had the pleasure of serving you locally as your county district supervisor in District 3. My goal, obviously, is to really solidify what representation really means. Right now, we're dealing with issues at the federal level that ultimately you can really reference they're very top-down. That's why we're seeing economic conditions, inflation, obviously the issues at the border, and ultimately local control. I mean, that is kind of a consistent theme, what it means to be a top-down government. I would argue that I'm coming, obviously, as your local guy fighting for bottom-up government.
Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lofgren, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. It was really an honor to be invited here tonight. You know, earlier today I was invited to go up and have a meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris, and I thought, well, at 10 I could do that, but when they changed it to the afternoon, I said, no way, I've got to be at San Benito Link. So I chose you over that. Because I love representing San Benito County. I'm down here often. I work with your local elected officials as well as your other state representatives, Rob Rivas and John Laird, who are excellent elected officials, to try and bring resources into this community and meet the needs that you have identified. I'm glad to be here, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. And Representative Lofgren, the first question will go to you. The vast majority of San Benito County workers commute to Silicon Valley, which has caused a huge headache on area roads and highways. What can you do to improve the situation quickly? For example, would it be feasible to have a bus system to and from Silicon Valley from San Benito County, ideally with internet, it says?
Well, obviously, the growth of Silicon Valley has adversely impacted the housing crunch throughout the region, not only San Benito, but also in Monterey County and also, even into the Central Valley. The local governments have not adequately addressed their housing needs for the jobs that have been created, and the result has been impacting their neighbors. That is starting to change. San Jose has approved huge numbers of high-rise housing. You can see them under construction, but a lot more needs to be done. And I think if people who work in Silicon Valley have an opportunity to live there, there will be less impact on on the neighbors. We do need to improve Highway 25, and I have actually solicited and helped get some money for that, $9 million. For the 3 mile between 156 and South, as well as another $73 million in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But we also need transit, and I'll do the rest in my closing.
All right. Peter Hernandez, will put the same question to you.
So, as you all know, we passed Measure G, $250 million. We're actually beyond that capacity to be able to fund it. That obviously highlights the reality. $9 million, I appreciate the sentiment of Congresswoman Lofgren, but the reality is we don't have the funds to be able to support that. There was obviously just a report that highlighted those issues. If we want to fast-track funding, we really need to bypass, ultimately, state governments and direct fund local governments. I actually came up with the policy idea, which is the Preserve Rural America Act. If you think about what's happening with us being the third fastest growing city of Hollister in the state, that is because of the fact that we actually aren't focusing on addressing our infrastructure, and ultimately, even like Measure G, when you have $35 trillion in debt, inflation is gonna capsize it. Any kind of reimbursement, whether it's through a grant process or whatever, it's never gonna catch up. I mean, technically speaking, if you think about inflation, it's a tax on the poor. And that's what we're dealing with. Local governments are losing power. They don't have the money to pay for it. We need to bypass state governments. We need to have a better relationship, and instead of telling local governments what to do, we need to work with them and ultimately address these issues.
Thank you, Peter Hernandez. The next question will come back directly to you. San Benito County is heavily impacted by Santa Clara County, The primary examples are traffic and housing. How can our representative truly represent us and ensure we're not neglected or even forgotten? How would you describe Santa Clara County's relationship with and impact on San Benito County?
Well, obviously, there's a housing mandate. State Senator Laird actually referenced that when he's talking about what's happening with unfunded mandates, forcing local governments to do things beyond their capacity. By default, unfunded means we don't have the money, but we're forcing you to do it. And that is the reality of the broken government because, again, it's top down. If we're actually wanting to address these issues, and we don't want to neglect local governments, and how about we listen to them, be informed by their discretion and their understanding, and actually give them their power back. The taxing mechanisms that they need at the local level, the funding mechanisms for them to be able to address these issues. I mean, and when it comes down to the impacts that we're dealing with Santa Clara County, I would argue that means we need to be able to slow the growth, manage the growth, obviously focus on commercial, increase revenue. I'm a small business owner. I understand if we want to actually get to a place of healthy, managing of resources and costs, then we increase our revenues, decrease our costs. That really means is the slowest way or the quickest way to do it is what Abraham Lincoln said, is ultimately no better government than the government that's closest to the people. That's your local government. You should be empowered instead of disempowered.
All right, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt the Abraham Lincoln quote there. Representative Lofgren, we'd like to pose the same question to you, please.
Well, I served on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors for some years and understand quite well the problems that the cities in Santa Clara County are creating for neighbors. In fact, we are pressing them to build housing, dense housing in urban cores where there is no objection. The transit issues are resolved, and that will help San Benito County as well as Monterey and others. I first met John Laird when we met after the Loma Prieta earthquake at the summit and promised to do a bus from Santa Cruz County over to downtown San Jose, which is running yet today. We could do something like that between Santa Clara County Transit and San Benito. And in fact, I've talked to the transit agency, which I used to chair, and they have an interest in being more closely aligned with the counties south of them. They really don't have that much in common with Marin County, to be honest. So I'm hopeful we can continue that.
Thank you. Representative Lofgren, the third question will start with you. Local measures like Measure A, which you just heard about, may limit commercial development that could provide jobs. How would you balance local land use decisions with the need for job creation and economic growth in our region?
Well, I did listen carefully to the Measure A arguments. I've not taken a position on that because I really don't think that it's the job of a U.S. Congresswoman to tell local voters how to vote on a local issue. I mean, land use decisions are made locally. They're not made in Washington, D.C., and they shouldn't be made in Washington, D.C. So what the voters decide here, I will take as a given, and I will work with whatever that decision is. Obviously, the people that I've met here, I love the people I've met here. They're hardworking, decent, family-oriented people. They want prosperity and peace in their neighborhoods, and I'm going to be listening to them and doing everything I can to make those ambitions true. Whenever I can bring resources to the county, whenever I can attune federal law so it works better here in San Benito County, that's my goal, not to tell local voters what to do on a local issue.
All right, and Peter Hernandez, same question.
Thank you. So the issue of Measure A is obviously brought up because of the lack of the increasing frustration of the public to address infrastructure issues. That obviously shows, to a certain extent, the sentiment of the public. They want more authority. I mean, you heard it from Congresswoman Lofgren. She wants a bus instead of the autonomy of individuals driving their vehicles and just having wider roads. By default, Highway 25 being it. Like I mentioned, Measure G, the money was literally allocated to address this. We don't have the money to fix Highway 25. So what does that tell you? We're spending beyond our means. What we're getting, we're not managing. By default, that means we're putting the public in a position to get in debt for something they're not actually going to receive. So if we're really wanting to address these issues, we have to address the inflation. We have to address the relationship with the local governments by empowering them and not taking away their power. And ultimately, that means that we have to have a better relationship where they inform our discretion when it comes to these policy decisions. We want to help them. If we want to help them, then we give them a better opportunity to manage their own resources.
All right, thank you. Now for closing statement, and I think we'll continue with the practice of the previous segment and make that a minute and a half instead of 30 seconds. Closing statement, Representative Lofgren, you go first.
Well, thank you very much. You know, again, when I was in local government, I took the lead on building some highways that were owned by the state. Highway 237, we made a freeway. We built Highway 85, and we expanded Highway 101. I know actually how to do that. Looking at Highway 25, I've been able to get millions and millions and millions of dollars into the Highway 25 fund. But I really think, working with our state legislators, that we need a better approach to building Highway 25 than we've seen. Honestly, my frustration with Caltrans was very high. They move very slowly, and it is possible to move quicker and still have a very well-designed project that can be built in a more timely fashion. I'm hoping, I've discussed this idea with a number of the local elected officials, that we might pull together and do something like that and have a combination of federal funds, state funds, and local leadership to actually get that job done. Thinking about my re-election, I would be honored to have your vote. I hope that we can continue to defend our constitutional government, our rule of law, and our democracy after this election. I look forward to standing up for the people of San Benito County in every way possible, and I always am eager to hear from you. So with that, thank you.
All right, thank you. Peter Hernandez, 90 seconds for a closing statement.
Thank you. So Ronald Reagan is one of the individuals, one of the presidents that I really aspire to. He mentioned that the issue of this election is that a little intellectually in a far distant capital would be able to be better suited to govern your lives than you be able to govern it for yourselves. That is the issue of this election. That is not a relationship building exercise when it comes down to, at the federal level, what we're dealing with. Right now, we're seeing high levels of inflation, right? $35 trillion in debt, $1 trillion just in interest alone. We're seeing human trafficking, sex trafficking at the southern border. We're seeing issues when a divided society, right? Everything's become partisan. If we really want to unite the public, I would argue the best thing we can do at the federal level, dealing with a small town like San Benito County, which I'm born and raised here. My mom worked the fields 30 years. I know what it means to be bottom up. I've actually started a business. I didn't just serve in local office, but I also know what it means to build a business. That means I understand the policies when it comes to administrating a business. If we really want solutions, we learn how to work with local governments. We create policies with them in mind. We bring them into the committee process. We bring them into the conversation of what it means to actually implement these policies, so that way they're vetted, they're tested, and ultimately they're successful. It's not that hard, I think, at the end of the day, the big distinction between I and Congresswoman Lofgren. She's been in office 30 years. I've served as a local guy. My only ask to you is,
right.
What do you have to lose?
Thank you, Peter.
I've been in office 4 years, and I'm willing to serve 2 terms, 3 terms, and I'm out.
Thank you, Peter Hernandez. All right, that concludes our segment on the congressional race. Thank you.